You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
I don't know. Sorry, it sucks to suck. I don't know what it's like to have a common name, so it's not really an issue. I'm the only Grace Topinka.
So I got the Instagram handle first, but somebody got Chelsea Rowan at Gmail before me.
I know. Your Gmails are... I'm not going to say what your emails are, but some of them are kind of weird.
Which ones?
The ones you use to log into New York Times crossword.
Oh.
I mean, it's just why. But anyways.
Okay, I made that in 2006.
Okay. All right.
When I needed
that's actually,
my first ever email for high school, freshman year.
That's not bad for 2006, because I don't even want to talk about my email names from those times. But yeah, I'm Grace Topinka now, if anyone's interested in finding me anywhere.
And I'm Chelsea
the only
Rowan.
one.
Come say hi. On Instagram and Twitter.
And Photobucket.
Don't say shit like that, because people will look us up on Photobucket, and I do not know what my Photobucket looks like.
I've taken mine off years ago.
I have to see if
anyways,
mine still is up.
This is Two Girls, One Crossword. We are the Good Evening Girls, and it's your favorite weekly Podword Crosscast.
Ooh, Grace did the whole shebang this week.
I did. I've been practicing. I was up all night.
I know.
Just rocking in a corner saying those lines, so I'm glad I really pulled it off.
Yeah, and I have the Nest app, so I have a camera set up in her apartment that I tune into Nest occasionally just to see how she's doing.
When you live alone, you need to make sure someone's checking up on you. Okay, I don't know how long it would take if I don't even want to jinx this, but if I died over quarantine, if it was during the work week, I feel like my boss would be like, kind of weird that Grace just hasn't shown up.
Well, I would know also.
But not really, though. I mean, how long into the day would you be like, huh? Be like,
okay, so it'd probably be like a day. But on day 2, I'd be like, I would talk to your boss, be like, have you heard from Grace? And they'd be like, no. And your boss might talk to me and see if I've heard from you. And I'd be like, no.
Okay, but what if it was a Saturday? I don't think anyone would find out till Monday. They would just think I was ignoring their messages.
I would think that I did something to make you upset. So.
Well, I hope you feel really guilty when you find out that I'm dead and you made it all about you.
I wouldn't feel guilty at all. That's just my anxiety. Anyway, hey, welcome to the podcast. We're talking about crosswords today, like we do every week. Yeah, that's kind of our shtick, right? We talk about crosswords.
That's our whole thing. Should we get into our heights and shites of the week?
Let's get into the heights and shites, which also stands for hits and shits. I feel like we haven't said hits and shits in a really long time. So if you're new listening and we say heights and shites, we're talking about the hits and shits of this week's crosswords.
We say heights and shites for the children because we don't want to teach them any foul language. And we know there's a lot of young kids listening to our podcast. Imagine. They would hate this.
I hope they would hate this. This is boring for them.
I'll start us off with something that had a height and a shite for me. And I'll start up with the shite. I was shocked and appalled. From the USA Today crossword on November 19th by our friend Paolo Pasco. 55 down. Cookie sometimes dunked in orange juice.
Okay, is it Oreo?
Yes, it's Oreo. Every cookie clue is Oreo, but in orange, come on.
No. I think that's a reference to something. So yeah, I think it's a reference to something because I think it was on Twitter maybe, but someone said, and I think they were probably just using chaos energy, which I kind of subscribe to. They said Oreos taste better in orange juice or something. But I found a thread on Reddit that was like, I think orange juice and Oreos, that wasn't a genuine thing. Someone was just trying to fuck with people, which is very likely on the internet. Don't believe everything you read on the internet, folks.
I don't. And I do think Paolo would do that. I hope that's not real. I mean, I guess it's not hurting anyone, but
it's hurting my heart.
Unholy. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will go into the hits of this week, which I didn't really, the theme, I didn't really understand totally until I read Sally's take on the USA Today crossword, which is a blog about the USA Today crossword, and you should check it out. But there were, the title of the crossword was Fetch the Bolt Cutters. And some of the clued answers were 19 across, hot take maybe, and the answer was bold statement. And then 36 across, Catskills region, and the answer was Borscht Belt. Basically the word, or it has B-O-L and then T at the end, like bold statement, and then Borscht Belt. So basically the word bolt is cut open. And there was no revealer for that, but Sally found 27 across was perfect Pitchfork rating. And Pitchfork is a music magazine, and they don't rate people, or they don't rate albums 10 very often. So the answer was 10. And then Sally wrote in her blog, a perfect score of 10 is rare. The most recent album to receive a perfect 10 rating in April 17th, 2020 was Fiona Apple's Fetch the Bolt Cutters. So that was like a really deep dive, a hidden gem.
Wow. Good job, Sally. Yeah. I would literally never, ever have gotten that. Never.
And that's why you don't run this blog.
It's definitely why I don't run the blog. It's why I run this podcast, which is for people who aren't very good at crosswords, but who really like crosswords. Great. That's nice. Let's see. What do I have for a hit this week? Did you do the Sunday Washington Post puzzle?
I did.
Done by Evan Bernholz, like always. The theme was fun. It was called Four of a Kind. It's basically like, I'll read you the revealer. 130 across, groups of 4, and what's spelled out by the groups of 4 in this puzzle's theme answers. And the answers, tetrads. So the themed answers have groups of 4 letters back to back. So I'll give you an example. 23 across, Gomez's texting sign-off to his hairy relative, ? Cousin, it, talk to you later, but TTYL, so cousin, it, TTYL. There's 4 T's back to back, a tetrad. Another example.
Cousin, it is spelled with 2 T's. For those
correct. If you don't know, now you know. Another one is 51 across, take part in a consumer protest over sporty car roofs, ? Boycott T-tops, so 4 T's. And then 119 across, disgusting, shipwrecked ship on a TV sitcom. This is referencing, I believe, Gilligan's Island. Or Gulligan's Island? Which one is it?
Gilligan's.
Oh, there's Gullah
Island.
So, okay.
Shout out to Kayla. Oh, what's her name? She's like blowing up on Twitter now. The voice of the girl from Proud Family. Right.
Anyway, okay. So they're referencing the show from the 60s or 70s or whatever time it came out. And the answer was gross SS minnow. So 4 S's. So it was just fun. I really just liked Gomez's texting sign off to his hairy cousin it, TTYL, because we like the Addams Family here on this podcast.
We do. We did an episode on them many months ago.
Yes, Grace did a great job.
I like that puzzle, and I had that same themed clued as some of my hits, so we're on the same wavelength.
Oh my god, it's a great day for us.
I have another hit from the New York Times, Wednesday, November 8th puzzle by Amanda Rafkin and Ross Trudeau. This is the kind of stuff us simpletons enjoy. 52 across, what might be taken to go, ? X-lax. More of that, please, in the New York Times.
Yes, please.
I enjoy that. It makes me laugh.
She's right. It does make us laugh. Speaking of New York Times that we liked, the Saturday, November 14th New York Times by Emily Carroll and Eric Agard is really good. My topic actually comes from this. I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, but there's 2 clues that I wanted to highlight that I just thought were fun. 27 across, lane hugger, ? And the answer was Kent, as in Clark Kent hugs Lois Lane. That's cute. And then 8 down, I swear, this is in quotes, I swear, ! And the answer is on God. On God, I'm not going to hit you. You're not going to hit me. On God, I'm not going to hit you. You're not going to hit me. On God. Anyway, that's TikTok sound. Thank you for listening.
Somehow I don't think that was the inspiration behind that clue, but maybe.
That's the only reason why I was like, holy shit, this puzzle's amazing, because I get to say on God and I get to recite the whole TikTok sound on the podcast. So.
And you did. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
I have another shout out to you. I don't know if you noticed this one on the New York Times Monday crossword from November 16th by Jennifer Nutt. 9 down, Sirius or Lassie, for example.
Oh, stars.
Dog star.
Yes, dog star. I loved that. So I did a topic on
Asta,
the famous, apparently, cinema dog. And then we talked a little bit about how
famous
Asta,
to some people,
to you, Asta was trained by the same people who trained the generations of lassies. And the lassies were all trained by the same family, the Weatherwax family or something like that. Apparently some Hollywood royalty there for you if you're interested in that kind of thing.
If you are interested, the episode is 63, Leg Humpers Anonymous, and it also features burlesque. So, if you want a little dog star and tassels, you can go check it out.
Saucy. Also from the Monday, November 16th puzzle, I really liked the theme here. This was fun. I'm going to give you the revealer. 59 across, small advances, or the progression suggested by the ends of 17, 23, 33, 41, and 48 across. And the answer was baby steps. So all of the themed answers end in some sort of movement for a baby. So I'll give you some examples. 17 across, sweet item at a bakery is jelly roll. It's like one of the first thing a baby learns how to do is to roll. 23 across, keep watch while a homeowner's away is house sit. The next thing they can do is they sit, right? And then 33 across, bar to bar activity is pub crawl. So then a baby crawls next. 41 across, what a speaker or musician may adjust before starting, mic stand. And then 48 across, easy win is a cakewalk. So in order, you have roll, sit, crawl, stand, walk, and these are baby steps. Very nice. I just liked it. It was cute.
Beautiful. It's crazy how they do that. And something interesting about if you don't do crosswords a lot, this is something that I don't know, maybe I'm just dumb. I hadn't really noticed. I had noticed it a little bit, but I noticed it a lot more now. That when there's themed answers like that, so that's like, what, 6 answers? Mm-hmm. They're all, including the revealer, they're all symmetrically placed within the grid.
I've never noticed because I don't look at that kind of thing.
Yeah,
which is probably why I wouldn't be a good constructor.
So that's part of organizing the crosswords. So it's just, I don't know, it's all types of hard. So when people can figure out something like that and then make it all fit.
God damn. More power to you.
That's why they get paid, and that's why they're New York Times.
That's true. Do you have anything else?
No, that's it for me, really.
I'll end us on some hits that I think you would appreciate. From the Monday, November 16th New Yorker by Cameron Austin Collins. The opener's great. 1 across, French. And the answer is swaps spit.
Nice.
As in kiss, like French kiss.
I get it.
Yeah, okay. And then 27 down, ones showing signs of nervousness or flirtatiousness. Lip biters.
Oh my gosh, Bella Swan much?
Oh my god. Wow, I didn't even put that together, but yes, Bella Swan, as played by Kristen Stewart, bites her lip all the goddamn time because she's just like so different from other girls. Anyway.
I think she was in that Kristen Stewart, one of her first, well, not her first movies, I shouldn't say that. She was in Panic Room or whatever with Jodie Foster, but she was in the adaptation of Speak. Do you remember that book? Okay, if you don't know, then you don't know. I can't explain it to you. But anyways, in the book, this girl like bites the shit out of her lips, and she does in the movie. So I'm like, that's, one
maybe
of her
that's
first
where she learned
chops
it
as a teenager, and she carried that over. I don't think she does as much anymore. We'll have to watch her Christmas movie to see if there's any lip biting.
We will report back.
We will let you guys know. We will give the people what they want and report on the important stuff.
I know you're all waiting to hear. She does lip bite in Twilight, so that's a fact.
She does. And like, look around. Should we flip our coin?
Let's flip the coin.
Cha-cha-ching.
I'm flipping the coin now. It's tails.
That's me. Cool.
That's Grace.
Cool. Okay, my clue comes from the Washington Post Sunday, November 15th puzzle, 4 of a Kind by Evan Bernholz. And my topic is kind of in the clue, so I'm going to say the answer first, Jeopardy style. 11 down, 'tis is the answer. In the question, deck the halls contraction.
'Tis the season to be jolly. Fa la 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 la. Yes, let's do it. I'm so excited.
I am going to be talking about Christmas traditions and their pagan starts.
Yes.
Pagan influences. Okay.
Oh my god, this is exactly what I need today. So
I figured it was timely. It's almost, I'm skipping right over Thanksgiving. I don't like Thanksgiving. I go from Halloween to post-Halloween to Christmas. Okay.
To the lead up to Christmas. Let's do it.
All right. Christmas, December 25th. It comes from the name Christ's Mass. It is the birth of Jesus Christ. And it is the winter holiday celebrated by Christians and non-Christians alike. Mm-hmm. All right. Decking the halls, exchanging gifts, lighting candles. Where did all of these traditions come from? Because they aren't in the Bible. I will tell you that much.
Mm-hmm. She would know.
I would know. I read it front to back for this episode. And that's because a lot of these traditions can be traced back to before Jesus Christ was even born before Christmas even happened, or as historians like to say, BC, before Christmas. And I'm going to go down a list of some traditions and explain where they may have come from. And this is all from an article on historycollection.com called 16 Pagan Christmas Traditions That People Mistakenly Credit to Christianity by Natasha Sheldon. This is a very informative article, but the names could be snappier. The titles could be snappier.
Right. It's like, which editor said yes to this title?
It's very like down to business.
Right.
Well, it came up in my search, so I guess it worked out for me. All right, so the first tradition I'm going to talk about is the 12 days of Christmas.
On the first day of Christmas, my true love gave to me a partridge in a pear tree.
It's so
really
hard to sing together on Zoom. Otherwise, we would sound great, believe.
Yes, it's true.
All right, so we've all sung the song. We've watched ABC Family's 12 Days Till Christmas, although now it's 25 days till Christmas. But
breaking tradition. All right.
I just wanted to ask you, for some reason in my mind, it's the 12 days leading up to Christmas. Growing up, because we used to have a Christmas countdown that would count down the days till Christmas, and every time we'd get to 12, I'd be like, oh my gosh, now it's the 12 days of Christmas.
Right. I feel like, isn't it part of the Advent calendar?
No. So the Advent calendar leads up to Christmas as well. The Advent calendar is the 4 Sundays before Christmas, 4 weeks before Christmas. Yeah,
I'm really bad at the actual Christian part of the Christmas.
Well, I will tell you where this comes from. Okay, so this multi-day tradition of celebrating Christmas on multiple days goes back to the Middle Ages. It was common for workers to take off work, relax, and celebrate Christ's birth with masses and parties and food for about 2 weeks. So essentially, it was like their winter break.
Nice.
In 567 AD, the Council of Tours, who ran the medieval Catholic Church, they officially announced the 12 days period between December 25th and January 6th was part of the Christmas celebration, or Christ Mass, as I still called it back then.
Okay.
Now, January 6th, for people who don't know, that is the Day of Epiphany or Three Kings Day. And it's basically the day that Jesus was presented with gifts from the three wise men or the three kings.
The Magi, you know.
Yeah. Okay, but hold on. I was going to talk about that. Oh, that comes later. Remember that. That'll come up later, January 6th. Okay, but the Catholic Church didn't invent, like, taking a break. They didn't invent winter break. Because even in BC, the Roman calendar was packed with winter festivals from mid-December to early January. For example, the Brumalia festival from ancient Rome started on the winter solstice on December 21st and went until January 7th and was dedicated to Janus, which was the god of beginnings and endings. And many people continued to celebrate these pagan traditions past as the Christian era started emerging. So the church was like, we need to Christianize these traditions, and so we're going to absorb them into Christmas celebrations. So
right, if you're looking to, like, you know, colonize a place or, like, you know, take Christianity to a place, you kind of have to absorb the traditions that already exist there in order to make it easier for them to convert.
This wasn't necessarily all, like, this was in Europe and stuff.
Right, but a lot of these people in Europe were pagans, right? So they had to be Christianized.
Well, everyone was pagan before God was born. So
it's true.
What do you want him to do? They can't be Christian. He wasn't even around yet.
It's true. Sorry.
Yeah. So anyways, people, basically, this was always a time of celebration, and the Catholic Church was like, well, we're getting in on that. We're buying in, and now it's the 12 days of Christmas.
All right.
So what about the Christmas feast?
Which one? The Feast of the Seven Fishes?
No.
Or is that just a Catholic thing?
Like a big dinner on Christmas Day.
Okay, sorry.
Right. Traditionally, Christians are supposed to fast during the Advent, which we talked about. That's the 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas, 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, until Christmas Eve. And then once Christmas Day came, they had a lot of making up to do, which led to a giant indulgent dinner.
Right. I guess that's kind of like what happens with Easter, too.
Yes, kind of. Yes. You also fast during Lent. But people still, you know, uphold that tradition today. They have big Christmas dinners. Mm-hmm. Not my family, because we celebrate the Cuban way, so we care about Christmas Eve more with our pig roasts. Okay, but in the Middle Ages, it was common for Christmas dinners to include lots of drinking, debauchery, and it was all justified by the celebration of Christ's birth. So this would lead you to believe that maybe big Christmas dinners were invented in the Middle Ages, but that's not true. There's proof that in 389 AD, Saint Gregory Nazianzen, one of the forefathers of the Greek church, warned against customs of feasting in excess and dancing at Christmas dinners. So this shows that big feasts were around even for the earliest Christmases.
Okay.
Historians believe they were a carryover from winter festivals like Brumalia mentioned earlier, and another called Saturnalia, which will come up a lot, where work was put aside and people drank, ate, and listened to music.
I feel like it was normal, like at the change of the seasons, like these big changes of the seasons were basically how we kept our lives in order, right? So you're just going to be like, fuck yeah, let's celebrate.
Exactly. So there was a time where it was kind of, they put a damper on it. They were like, don't eat a bunch and drink a bunch. And then it kind of came back in the Middle Ages.
Diet culture is not the way, folks.
No.
Eat a big Christmas feast.
I agree with that. All right. What about Christmas caroling? 'Tis the season to be jolly. Fa la 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 la.
Is this Middle Ages? Tell me.
Yes. So most Christmas carols are joyful songs about the birth of Christ, blah, blah, blah. Carolers go door to door, or they get paid to show up at zoo lights. Or maybe they're volunteers. I don't know.
Who knows?
Yeah. But, they spread Christmas cheer. But that was not always the way. So the origins of carolers or carols lie in agricultural superstitions in the Middle Ages. You were right.
Okay.
These songs were sung to drive away evil spirits and bring good harvest. Year-round, country people would walk around the village singing songs that offered good wishes and blessings in return for food or drink. I wish that was a job you could do now.
I would sign up immediately. You and I would do great.
Yeah. No, people would hate us. They'd actually probably give us food and drink to go away, but mostly...
Right. We would have a lot of fun. The people we're singing to would probably not have too much fun.
Well, in the winter, so these carolers were year-round. So there was just people that would walk around the town singing door to door. But in the winter, they would additionally bring around hot cider, sometimes spiked.
Hello.
Christmas hymns weren't even a part of church ceremonies until the 13th century, and many carols we sing today weren't even written until the 1800s as a way to revive caroling traditions from those superstitious agricultural days, but make them Christian.
Yes, the Victorians loved their caroling. That's
did.
A fact.
All right. And now what about this clue? Decking the halls with boughs of holly. All right. Tinsel, ornaments, bits, and baubles have become a hallmark of holiday cheer.
Yes.
I still have my Halloween decorations up, but I will put my Christmas decorations up after Thanksgiving.
I took my Halloween decorations down today.
Sad. I like to do it all in one switcheroo.
I feel you.
But decorating with winter greenery was around way before Christianity. Bringing in greenery during the winter was a way to liven up an otherwise dead and dreary season. It also warded off evil spirits. In ancient Rome, temples were decked in new foliage for winter festivals. And in Egypt, where they didn't have that type of greenery, they would use palm leaves, which are a symbol of resurrection and rebirth. And if you've ever been to Palm Sunday, which is a Sunday before Easter, then you know that they still use palm leaves in church. And if you can fold a cross out of a palm leaf, then you're a real one. And
hey.
I used to do that. And then my grandma would put it on her wall. Anyways.
Yeah, right.
But the practice of hanging evergreen around entrances was called crowning the doors. And our little Greek friend, St. Gregory Nazianzen, one of the founders of Greek Christianity, he warned people against doing this as well.
What was this guy's deal?
Because he was like, no, these are all pagan traditions. Don't do it. And then eventually people were like, wait a minute, those are still fun. Let's keep doing it. And we'll just say they're Christian.
Perfect.
Okay, but this brings us to Christmas trees. For centuries, trees have been venerated as symbols of life. The Celtic tribes of Europe, the Vikings, the Saxons, they all had traditions of tying offerings to trees. But the Christmas tree and red ornaments may be tied back to medieval mystery plays. There was a famous play that featured Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, where the paradise tree was created by a fir tree hung with apples. By the 16th century, similar trees adorned with apples were popping up in the doorways of German houses. And the doorway thing comes from crowning the doors as a way to protect buildings from evil spirits.
Okay. I love this shit.
Mm-hmm. So what about wreaths? We had a wreath making party last year.
We did. We had so much fun.
Yeah. Wreaths are relatively new to the game. Okay. They were made popular by Lutheran Protestants in the 16th century.
Okay.
And the circular shape represents Christ's eternal life, and it was originally used horizontally on a table to hold Advent candles. The 4 candles.
I feel like we had a lot of those in my house, for Christmas decorations. You get out the Advent wreath, and I didn't even understand what it was. It wasn't like I was necessarily raised ultra religious, but we had the damn wreaths with the candles in them.
Yeah, we had that too. However, the use of fir branches that are used in the wreaths have pagan origins. Wreaths were an ancient way of celebrating a victory way before Christianity showed up, and wreaths and garlands made out of fir branches were part of Saturnalia's festival decorations.
Okay.
So once again, it goes back to Saturnalia, the winter solstice festival.
Okay.
All right, so speaking of wreaths, what's the deal with holly?
Tell me.
The spiked leaves and the red berries. You may have heard some stories that tie holly to Christ. These are not in the Bible. These have been created afterwards by Christians. Some even associate holly with the crown of thorns that Christ wears. But holly, in fact, was the symbol of another pagan king, the Holly King. Legend has it that the Holly King battled with the Oak King every midwinter. The Oak King represented the fading summer season, and every winter the Holly King would win.
I love this. I want to see the movie.
What?
Of the Holly King beating the shit out of the other king.
Okay, but let's turn it up a notch. What about mistletoe?
Ooh.
Okay, so historians officially date the practice of kissing under the mistletoe to the 18th century. However, mistletoe and romance have always been related to each other. Okay,
tell me.
Pliny the Elder, an ancient Roman author who wrote natural history, said that mistletoe was used in antidotes to poison and as an aid in fertility. The Norse god Frigga, who is the goddess of love, considered mistletoe sacred.
Ooh.
And when Norse warrior tribes were meeting peacefully, they would lay their arms under a bough of mistletoe.
I love this.
So its connection with love and peace explains why it was adopted into Christian traditions.
Okay.
All right, what about the Yule log? That is my favorite Netflix channel during the holidays.
Do not tempt me with a good Yule log, because I will have that shit on like all year round.
It makes things so cozy. If you don't know, Netflix has a channel where it's like a fireplace. Essentially, just search Yule log in there. You'll find there's a couple different ones.
There's like a birch one. So if you have like, if you're going for like a muted, like modern look, then there's one with like regular logs, but it has music. There's another one that's just logs. You get the crackling. And then Netflix kind of like went off the rails, I think, in like 2017. And they made like the Yule log in an alleyway, dumpster fire. And there's like a whole like elf plot line if you actually watch.
But it doesn't really go anywhere.
We watched it once.
Yeah.
It's random.
It's like 4 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. But back to Yule log. Well, today it's also like a chocolatey dessert, which I have never had in my life, but I know that's a thing that people make. Okay, but back in the day, the Yule log was the center of Christmas activity. Now it's kind of gone by the wayside, but that was because it was cold as hell and the Yule log kept everyone warm. And people were like obsessed with the Yule log. So these young men, they would like parade into the house with the log, and people would like be singing songs and toasting them. And it's like a whole ceremony thing. And then the master of the house would light the Yule log on fire using the previous year's log as kindling. So I don't know. That sounds pretty pagan to me.
Yes,
all this, it does. Fire festivals were held during winter solstices to stay warm and celebrate the returning of the sun. And Yule logs were used because they were so big, so they could burn for a really long time. And sometimes their ashes were even scattered across the field to make the ground fertile. That's all people cared about in those days, agriculture.
Growing food.
Mm-hmm. But speaking of fire, what about candles? So you may know the Christian tradition of lit candles in windows to symbolically guide Jesus as he goes from house to house on Christmas Eve. That's what I read that they're for. I think that's a Polish thing.
Is
to
it
put
really?
the candles in the window. You see it a lot in Chicago. Not real candles. You can buy like the fake ones.
I like putting candles in the window. I think it looks really nice and really wintry. But yeah, we do have a big Polish population here, so.
Yeah, for some reason I think I don't know actually.
If you're Polish,
Sorry,
let us know.
If I'm wrong, let me know. For some reason I want to say also like Kirsten, the American Girl doll, had something to do with that.
Oh, now that you say it.
But she's not Polish, she's Scandinavian, right?
No.
Or she just has braids. I don't know.
Now that you say that, maybe
okay.
she was, Scandinavian, like Swedish, but I thought that was Polish when I was reading her. Ooh, okay. Next.
Right. Yeah. Get ready for a corrections corner next week on this. Okay.
Right.
So the whole candle thing is obviously likely inspired by the Jewish winter holiday Hanukkah, where they light candles.
Mm-hmm.
However, candles were used to celebrate the birth of the sun around midwinter as well, and they were also given out as gifts or offerings to Saturn during the Saturnalia festival.
Saturn comes back again, folks. He strikes again.
Yes. And speaking of gifts, what about gift giving? All right.
Yeah.
Many people think that gift giving has to do with the wise men bringing Jesus, the frankincense and myrrh, and it's basically become like the main part of Christmas today because of capitalism.
Hashtag capitalism.
Yes. But fun fact, up until the 1800s, it was customary to give presents on New Year's Day, closer to Epiphany or Three Kings Day.
Okay.
And this is what my mom used to do when she was little. She did not get presents on Christmas Eve. Not that she grew up in the 1800s, but she didn't grow up in Cuba, and said that they would do like the Christmas Eve dinner, no presents on Christmas, and then they would get presents on January 7th or 6th, which is Epiphany. And that is common, I think, in other Latin American countries. But however, winter gift giving goes back to the pagans too. On December 23rd, the Romans held a festival called Sigillaria, which is a day where markets were set up to sell sigillas, which is the pottery figures that went with candles that were made as an offering to Saturn. And as time went on, Sigillaria got absorbed into Saturnalia and became a time to buy gifts for loved ones and patrons.
Okay.
And what about the King of Christmas?
I had not Santa?
It's not Santa. He's the
I'm like, who the heck is King of Christmas?
King of Christmas was Santa before Santa. So
during is he the one that? Sorry, let me just. Is he the one where you put your shoes outside?
No, I think that's the Three Kings.
Oh, and okay. Sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I don't know. Again, I can't research everything, so we'll get back to you about that next week. But
sure.
Okay, during the Middle Ages, the Lord of Misrule was the King of Christmas, and he was kind of like a Santa Claus figure. He would be at feasts, dances, the royal court. Obviously, not like a real. He was a man dressed up as this. Like figure, right?
Are you sure? Prove it.
He would sit at the head of the table and would receive mock homage and praise. They tried to pass this off as a Christian tradition, but this character is taken directly from Saturnalia festivals where the Lord of Misrule would ensure that everyone drank too much and behaved foolishly.
I love that.
But that eventually went away, obviously.
We should have this party.
Yeah.
The next time we can, we could have like two kings. You and I could be the kings, and we could just make sure everybody gets really drunk.
Sure. Well, we will never have a party again, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right, but that brings me to Santa.
Yes.
For Father Christmas, Santa Claus. So Santa has saintly origins with Saint Nicholas, sorry. The Christian saint who was known for giving gifts to the poor and needy. December 6th is Epiphany, is Saint Nicholas Day. But there are plenty of pagan wintertime gift givers. For example, the god Odin was known to drive a sleigh pulled by reindeers.
Yes, he was.
Suspicious.
Hmm.
La Befana is an ancient Italian witch who delivered presents on broomstick.
I love that.
And there's a bunch of other examples of these figures who would deliver presents in winter. So then Christians were like, we need a version of that.
Right.
Let's create Santa Claus after St. Nicholas.
Perfect. I mean, they did pick a really good one with St. Nick. I think he has a good look.
Yeah, they did. It worked out for them.
It worked out.
And then my final one, Christmas Day, December 25th. The thing is, no one knows the exact day that Jesus Christ was born.
But we do know it wasn't December 5th. We do know
December
that.
25th. Well, they weren't really keeping track back then.
Right. And we were on a different calendar, too, I think.
Yeah. Well, yes. Anyways,
we can't get into it.
I don't want to get into that because I don't want to say something wrong. But I do know that in year 221 AD, Sextus Julius Africanus linked the birth of Christ to December 25th. And then about 100 years later, in 354 AD, the date was officially added to the Roman calendar as Christmas. And over the next 2 centuries, the idea spread all over Europe. But why did he choose December 25th? Well, December 25th historically is the first day that people could appreciate the increased sunlight after the winter solstice. The day was historically marked as the birthday of sun gods like Mithras or Sol Invictus. It's thought that the early church chose December 25th to absorb some of the festivities surrounding the sun god celebration and refocus them instead on the birth of Christ. So, all I have to say to you is I hope that you have a Merry Saturnalia and a Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. I love this. I may do more research on this after we get off the line because this is like so far up my alley.
Well, I find it interesting. Some churches, it's not all churches, some churches don't celebrate Halloween because they say it's like too pagan. But it's like so many Christian traditions are taken from paganism. And
Right.
I think there are some really intense churches that do not celebrate Christmas at all.
Right.
The way that, people traditionally do. But I
Right.
feel like if your intention is to celebrate it, if you're a Christian and your intention is to celebrate it in a Christian way, then I think it's fine to borrow, traditions, ancient, it kind of like evolved over time. And I feel like traditions are allowed to do that. But you shouldn't be like, oh, we can't have wreaths because that's like pagan and it's against, those are from a time before Christianity was even around. So
right. Well, I mean, we could debate this for hours about how certain sects of Christianity will, pick and choose what they want to believe and what they want to practice. They hate gay people, but they're not going to sell their daughter into slavery. That kind of thing. So hey, I mean.
Wait, so they're not going to sell their daughter into slavery?
They're not, but they will believe that homosexuality is bad. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you're picking and choosing here. Where like,
all I'm trying to say is give Halloween a chance, all right?
That's basically the root of all messages coming from this podcast is give Halloween a chance.
Christmas is more pagan than Halloween at this point.
I agree.
Everything
I
has
agree.
pagan origins. But yeah, so just something to think about this holiday season as you put up your decorations.
I am going to think about that so much. One topic that you did not talk about is the anti-Santa, which is the tie-in between Christmas and Halloween. What's his name? The evil
Jack
Santa.
Skeleton?
No, he like throws the kids in a sack over his back.
Who are you talking about? Is this from a movie?
No. Oh my God, hold on.
What, from The Office?
No.
You know what I'm talking about?
No.
The devil?
It's Bad Santa.
Bad Santa? Isn't that a Tim Allen movie?
No. Shit, hold on.
No, Tim Allen is Santa Claus. Who's Bad Santa? Is that like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito? No, I know that's twins for anyone listening, but okay.
Krampus.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't talk about Krampus, who is like the you know how like you hear that you get coal if you're being bad, etc. Well, Krampus is like anti-Santa who will come to your house if you're a bad kid and put you in a sack and throw you over his shoulder and then, take you away and whatever. And actually in Scandinavian countries, as part of like Christmas celebrations, they have Krampus celebrations where people will go flood the streets dressed as this evil Santa. And I think that's amazing.
Well, by the way, Bad Santa stars Billy Bob Thornton. That was all. I was all the way wrong. Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't a Santa Claus movie though, where he has to like get that toy.
The toy.
The kid. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what that's called.
Anyway,
wow, I love
that
Christmas.
That wraps us up on Christmas. Yeah.
So my topic comes from the Saturday, November 14th New York Times by Emily Carroll and Eric Agard, 18 across. Literally, quote, art doer. And the answer is geisha.
Yay!
Yes. Cool. So we're going to be talking about geishas today.
Wait, why is it? I don't understand the clue for it, though.
So the word literally means art doer. And I will explain the etymology. So Let's get into it. So what is a geisha? A geisha is a class of female entertainers from Japan, and they're trained in traditional styles of performing, such as like Japanese dance and singing. And they're known for their distinct appearance. They have like long trailing kimonos, traditional hairstyles, and they have this special type of makeup, which is called oshihoroi. And I'm really sorry for my pronunciations. And that is the white face powder, the red lips, and the black and red eyeshadow.
Mm-hmm.
And just to clear it up, at the very beginning, geisha are not sex workers. And this is a misconception started in the West.
Shocking.
LOL.
To no
Go
one.
figure. Yeah, right? So we'll get into why this misconception started a little bit later. But geisha are not sex workers. Oirin are a specific category of high-ranking courtesans that are closely related to geisha. And they look similar, quote unquote, similar potentially to the Western eye, and that's why it's easy to confuse them. One is a geisha, and one is an oiran, and one is a sex worker, and one is not. Okay?
Got it.
So oiran were considered to be above like your common sex worker because while they engaged in sex work, they also have skills in traditional like arts and entertainment. And the highest ranking oiran could actually like choose which customers they took. So they were just like basically high-end sex workers. Cool. Good for them. So going back to the clue, the word geisha consists of two parts. Ge, meaning art, and sha, meaning person or doer. So literally, the translation into English would be art doer or something like artist, performing artist, or artisan.
That makes sense.
So where do geishas come from? Where do they originate? This is one of those topics, and I often seem to pick these topics that just go really, really deep. And I had to like super kind of like pick and choose what I wanted to talk about here. So I'm going to like brush over the history of where geishas come from. It starts in like the 16th century, sort of, in Japan. The ruling class of Japan at this time was called the shogunate, which is basically a hereditary military dictatorship that ruled from like the 1100s into the late 1800s. And the shogunate established these walled-in pleasure districts or pleasure quarters known as yakuku. And by the early 17th century, sex work was illegal outside of these districts. So you could not, be a sex worker unless you were working inside here and they were licensed and like a legitimate form of work, right? Mm-hmm. So this is where we see oiran for the first time. And you could also find common sex workers in these, yakuku. And these quarters became so popular that entertainment was like not just sex within these these districts. It would be like sex work, but also like all different types of entertainment you could find here.
Yeah, you have the audience.
Exactly.
Make money off of it.
Exactly. So clients were entertained by dancing, singing, playing music, poetry, calligraphy, etc. Calligraphy.
Sounds like a fun time.
Right? What else are you going to do in the 17th century? So by the 18th century, the first legitimate geisha appeared, and they were men. They were basically traveling entertainers. They would go from party to party and entertain customers through song and dance. They got a pretty good gig. And around this time in the 18th century was when the forerunner of the female geisha appeared. And these were called ordoriko, or dancing girls. And they were teenage girls who were trained and hired as chaste dancers within these pleasure districts. And as they aged, they began calling themselves geishas to distinguish themselves from the younger versions of themselves. So the odorikos were literally teenage girls, and the geishas were older. So by the 19th century, the geisha profession was essentially entirely female and established as a distinct profession from oiran. And there were actually edicts put in place to kind of protect the business of the oiran and other sex workers. So geisha were forbidden from selling sex, though some did. And geisha were forbidden from wearing flashy hairpins or kimonos because that was like the hallmark of the oiran.
Okay.
Kind of interesting. So oirans were once considered to be celebrities and the authorities on all things fashion. But by this point, the 19th century, their status was kind of waning because geishas were coming up and geishas were less expensive to hire. So geishas were kind of establishing themselves as these worldly, cutting-edge entertainers, and they were more daring than oiran. The oiran had kind of gotten so comfortable and also entangled in upper-class lifestyle that by this point, a middle class had evolved, and the geisha was kind of taking over as the entertainer for the middle class. And the middle class is much larger than the upper class, and so the geisha took over. And that is a massive oversimplification of what happened, but it's basically what happened. Okay, so many fashion trends started by geishas soon became widely popular to regular women. And these kinds of traditions actually continue to this day. One example, there is this thing called a heiori, and it was like traditional for geishas to wear this piece of clothing, which is basically like a hip to thigh length jacket worn over a kimono. And geishas wore this, and then it became like high fashion at the time. And you can actually see people still wearing this as part of traditional Japanese dress. So by the end of the 19th century, Oiran and other courtesans and sex workers no longer held their celebrity status, and this declining trend continued until sex work was criminalized in Japan in 1956. It's actually it's actually relatively recent.
Yeah. Well, that's a long time that it was allowed, and then all of a sudden they were like, no.
Exactly, and I don't actually know why, but I'm sure that would be a really interesting topic one day, if that ever showed up in a crossword. Who knows?
What year did... Well, there's no numbers in crosswords anyways, but...
I mean, there could be, but not usually. Okay, so then we get to World War II. Before World War II, geisha numbers were estimated to be around 80,000 in Japan. But most of these geisha were conscripted into the war effort in World War II, like working in factories, for instance. And a lot of the geishas stayed on with their wartime jobs, considering they were more stable. But then a lot of geisha did return to their job. And after the war, they were kind of between the age of 20 and 24. That was like your typical geisha age after World War II. Although many would retire by mid-20s after finding a patron, where basically you would have a client that liked you so much that they would be like, retire, and you would live like in a life of luxury thanks to this patron.
All right.
Works for me.
After being an accountant for 10 years, doesn't sound too bad.
Where do I find a patron? Training to be a geisha. So what is the deal? Like, how did you become a geisha? Before the 20th century, geisha began training around age 6. I actually saw in some places geisha training would begin around age 3, which is like insane.
Yeah, how do you get a 3-year-old to do anything?
I mean, I don't know. You just got to be really mean to them, I guess. It sounds like child abuse to me. Okay. But that was before the 20th century. We're in the 20th century now, or 21st century technically now. But in contemporary times, geisha training typically begins around 17 or 18. And in a lot of places in Japan, there's all these laws in place, like labor laws, about when you can and can't start training to become a geisha. You have to complete a certain level of school, etc. And a lot of girls don't start until after they finish college, which is kind of cool.
That's like you can't join the Lovables, the Chicago Bulls basketball team, unless you have a full-time job.
Really?
Yes.
I don't know what that is even. Like,
that's the professional dance team.
Well, that's great. I'm glad for them.
I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was definitely a thing. Yeah.
We may have a hefty corrections corner next week. Who knows?
We'll have to release like a mini-sode.
Yeah, right? Okay, so you can start training to become a geisha at 17. But before debuting as an apprentice geisha, you must first move to an okiya, which is a geisha lodging house, usually run by a woman known as the mother of the house, who is usually an ex-geisha herself. So you live in this okiya, and you live there as a shikomi, which is a trainee. And you learn the skills to become an apprentice. You attend the needs of the house. Basically, you're cleaning it, keeping it tidy, that kind of thing. You're learning to live with your geisha sisters and within the pleasure districts. So the training period typically lasts a year now as a trainee. But in the past, it could have lasted years and years and years. Oftentimes, like established geishas would actually take in young children, young girls, and bond to them. And that's when they could kind of start their training at 3, 6, whatever. Or sometimes, like these shikomi or trainees were daughters of geishas brought up to be geishas themselves. So these geishas would have children and then raise their children to be geishas. After your like training period, you kind of move into the apprenticeship stage. And this is you're called a meiko there. And this is where you're kind of bonded by contract to a particular okiya, which is the geisha house. That you're working and living at. So these okiyas would provide you with food, board, your kimono, your obi, spelled O-B-I, which comes up in crosswords a lot. It's crosswordese. It's the little sash that ties your kimono. And so yeah, this like lodging house would provide all of this for you. And training is super expensive, like truly so expensive. And everything must be paid back to the okiya eventually.
Yeah, and I was going to say, how do these young girls afford that? They're supposed to pay it back once they become geishas and start making money?
Exactly. And the only way you can kind of start making like money is by paying your debt off to the okiya. And once your debt is paid off, all of the money comes to you. But it can take a long time. And we're going to talk about some women that get stuck having to pay their debts later and what they do to have to do that. So the meiko training begins with learning by observation at geisha parties, where essentially they watch other geishas interact with customers. The goal is to learn the techniques of conversation, party games, and the proper decorum for banquets and parties. So they basically just sit quietly in a corner and just watch. And that's actually a tradition in a lot of Japanese like traditional arts, is learning by observation. You're expected to just like be an apprentice and watch and figure it out. The next stage is formal arts, where you study traditional instruments like the shamisen, which is like a 3-stringed, I don't want to say it's like a guitar, but it's like the closest thing I could think of. It's like
3-stringed strumming instrument.
Exactly. So you can learn that, the flute, drums. They also learn games, traditional songs, calligraphy, traditional Japanese dances, the tea ceremony we talked about when I talked about wabi-sabi. Okay, listen to that episode. It's pretty interesting. Anyway, so they learn the tea ceremony, literature, poetry. And then the final stage of your apprenticeship is the social skill, where you learn the complex web of societal life within the pleasure district, your formal greetings, gifts, visiting with each other, etc. By the age 20 and 21, a Meiko will graduate to geisha in a ceremony known as Urike. I'm really sorry about these pronunciations. And that means the turning of the collar. The ceremony is essentially marked with changes of appearance. So you graduate from apprenticeship into geisha. So instead of wearing a red and white collar under your kimono, like as an apprentice would, you graduate to a white collar. Okay. And instead of styling your actual hair as an apprentice, you graduate to wearing these traditional wigs as a geisha would. And once you debut, there is no more training and you can work as long as you want. And some geisha work into their 90s.
Oh my gosh.
It's crazy. Wow. Right. But geisha have long been kind of considered or like lumped into groups with sex workers. And there's nothing wrong with being a sex worker. Obviously, it's legitimate work. But it's complicated, the connection between sex work and just being like a legitimate geisha, because the geishas kind of came up around the same time these oiran were coming up, and they were constricted to these pleasure districts where you're working in close proximity with oiran, and these professions were built off of the wants and needs of men. So of course there's going to be some like through line, some thread of like, are these women selling their bodies? And it's like, you know, some are and some aren't. Yeah. So let's get into it. Geisha and sex work. So they've been, you know, misconstructed by Western society as sex workers, but sex work has mostly been illegal within the geisha profession. That's not to say that some geisha didn't engage in sex work, because they did, either through personal choice or through force or coercion. So when the Allies occupied Japan during World War II, some sex workers began advertising themselves as geisha girls. They actually pronounced it geisha girls because the Western men couldn't pronounce it right. So they were called geisha girls. And like men would actually go into places and they'd be like, we want geisha girls, we want geisha girls. And it's just ridiculous. Anyway, so this kind of advertising themselves as geisha girls, mostly because foreign soldiers couldn't tell the difference between legitimate geishas and oirans, which were the sex workers. And Western soldiers used the term geisha girls for many types of Japanese women workers, whether or not they were selling sex. So like it could be like a hostess or like some girl at the bar or whatever. Yeah. And yes, this lent to the idea in the West that any woman wearing a kimono is offering sex and entertainment. Go fucking figure. And then there's also this tradition, and you may know of this. There's this, I don't know, it's not a tradition. It's like a practice. It's called mizuage. Are you familiar with this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. You might be more familiar with it as I talk about it. So it literally translates to, quote, raising the waters, and it's an innuendo for the process of selling an apprentice's virginity as part of her geisha raising ceremony.
No,
have you heard of that?
No.
Okay. So mostly, mizuage is a ceremony undergone by junior sex workers, though some Meiko geishas, so like the apprentice geishas, underwent the ceremony as well as a way to pay off the fees incurred during their trainings.
Oh.
Yes. And some okiya owners, so these are the women that own the geisha lodging houses, they would actually sell an apprentice's virginity more than once to different customers, and they would pocket all of the money. And it was a way that they would exploit these like young apprentice girls, which is sad.
Yeah.
So, let's see.
But
here.
if you were selling it yourself, then yeah, it makes sense. Sell your virginity like 10 times. No one would ever be able to
bank.
tell.
Right, exactly. Like no judgment here.
Yeah.
In 1956, a former geisha named Sayo Matsuda wrote her experience where she was sold for her virginity a number of times by the mother of her okiya. So it happened all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 1956, the prostitution prevention law in Japan criminalized most sex work, such as the mizuage practice. So it's technically not done anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if in some places... Yeah, exactly. Legally. So this brings me to Memoirs of a Geisha. Have you seen this movie? I was wondering.
No, I've never seen it.
Okay. So I watched
or read the book. It's a book, right?
It is a book.
Yep.
I watched this movie when I was in high school, maybe. It came out in 2005. And I remember liking it when I watched it, but I also just like watched so many movies in high school, and I was constantly consuming any sort of historical fiction I could, which is probably why I liked it. I wonder how I would feel now. So let's talk about Memoirs of a Geisha. It is probably the most famous Western depiction of geisha, like the geisha lifestyle and the history of geishas, all of that. And it was written by this guy named Arthur Golden. It's very white sounding, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask who wrote this book.
Yeah, Arthur Golden wrote this book.
Oh, no.
And then there was a film that came out in 2005, blah, blah, blah. Golden is an American historical fiction author. The book took him 6 years to write. He went and met a bunch of like ex-geishas and geishas and did like a ton of research on it, and then wrote, kind of like took all their stories and combined them and like wrote this story. One of the geishas that he talked to is an ex-geisha. She's famous, and like she was known as being like one of the star geishas in the 60s and 70s, apparently. She performed for Prince Charles, the Queen's sister's husband, like all these people. She like performed for them, apparently.
Yeah.
Anyway, her name is Minako Iwasaki. And Iwasaki participated in Golden's research because Golden agreed to keep her anonymous, which of course he did not. In the acknowledgement for his book, he said like she was the most important person to kind of create this story for his book. And he pulled a lot of her personal stories he put into the main character of the book.
Yeah. Why would he promise her he'd keep her anonymous and then be like, psych?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your full name at the end of the novel.
Yeah, he sounds like a piece of shit, in my personal opinion. You can have your own opinion, listeners, but he sounds like a piece of shit. Anyway, so Iwasaki received horrible repercussions because she was mentioned at the back of the book, especially from women still in the field or even ex-geisha and other Japanese people as well, for portraying the profession and the culture negatively. And there's also a tradition in like geisha, traditions where there's like a code of silence between geisha in regards to their clients. And it was like considered that she broke that by doing this thing. So she sued Golden, rightfully, and it was settled out of court. Yeah, so the film received mixed to negative reviews in Japan, mainly because the three main actors were cast were all Chinese, not Japanese.
Oh, come on.
I know. And like I'm just like, yeah, this is bad. But also it got negative reviews because the portrayal of geisha was inaccurate or too westernized. Go figure. I mean, the author was a Westerner, so like, hello.
Yeah.
So, in March of 2000, Iwasaki, this is the ex-geisha, spoke to The Independent about her reaction upon reading the book. So apparently, like, there's a lot in the book that she did not like the day-to-day details of living in Japan or being a geisha were just wrong, were misrepresented, such as like which kimono a geisha would wear or what an apprentice would wear, the streets that these women would walk down, the smell of the bathroom in the geisha house. Like Golden said that it smelled really bad, and Iwasaki was like, there's absolutely never a smell in a geisha bathroom. It is the cleanest room in the lodge. And just like things like that really pissed her off. But then there are the large complaints. And I'm just going to read you some quotes because you need to hear it from her. Okay, this is from the independent article that I found. Quote, "No true geisha," she insists, "would allow herself to be cut on the thigh, as Sayori does, in a ploy to gain the attention of a rich but repulsive doctor. Geisha would never refer to the act of love as Sayori and her friends do in the terms of the eel swimming into the eel's nest." "The eel's nest," exclaimed Mrs. Iwazaki. "I was an apprentice and a geiko," which is another word for geisha, for 20 years, and the first time I came across that expression was in this book." Another quote. "Here we reach the heart of Miss Iwazaki's complaint, the custom known as mizuage, which is crucial to the plot of Memoirs of a Geisha. Mizuage is the practice by which an apprentice's virginity is auctioned off to the highest bidder. In the novel, Sayori's mizuage fetches a record price, and despite emphasizing the fictional character of Sayori, Golden has stated publicly that this detail was borrowed directly from Mineko's experience. Quote, $30,000 would sound pretty outrageous, but she sold it for 100 million yen, which is $850,000, Golden told an American radio interviewer last year. So that was in 1999. Quote, which is a staggering amount of money, end quote. Here's more. Quote, sharing the sexual history of a friend with a few million radio listeners might be regarded as ungallant in any circumstances. To a lady as proud and respected as Miss Iwazaki, the mortification is intense, especially as she claims she never told him anything of the sort. Quote, I told him I would never sell myself for any amount of money, she says. When a geiko is successful, such rumors always spread. Sometimes, if an apprentice had a patron whom she was in love with, then there might be a purchase of her virginity, but it never happened to me.
So he just made it up?
I mean, at this point, it's like a battle of words, and I will always choose the side of a woman and not a man who is, like, using some other culture to, like, make money.
Make money. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So then what was the author's, Golden's response to Iwazaki's anger? Here's a quote. Quote, the book is not supposed to portray every geisha's experience, he says. It's the experience of one particular geisha. I made a lot up, and it's not how Mineko experienced it. But it's not about her. It's neither right nor wrong, end quote. And then, regarding her anger towards the, Mizuage, he says, quote, I'd never have said such a thing if I thought that she'd have been so upset, says Golden. But he stands by his version of what she told him, and he says he has tapes of all their conversations.
Yeah, he does kind of sound like an a-hole.
I didn't think she would be upset. Ugh.
Really? You didn't think?
So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what she said on those tapes. I've never heard them. But what I do know is that he made a shit ton of money off this book. And this woman was exploited, in my personal opinion.
Well, and it's kind of sad that is, like, you're right, that is when I think of geishas, that's, like, one of the first things I think of, because that's their mainstream representation in, like, Western media.
Right.
Is there another, geisha book or movie written by an actual
She actually
geisha?
had a response novel that you can buy and read, where she actually talks about her experience.
Okay, good to know. Maybe we'll tweet about it.
If anybody's read it, let me know. I'd be interested to see what she has to say. But that's what I have for geishas. The topic, there's so much I could talk about with the topic, but I really wanted to talk about Memoirs of a Geisha before the end here.
Yeah, no, very interesting. I like that.
Yeah. And you can, like, one thing I didn't include here is that, like, you can still, like, go and get entertained by geishas today in Japan. Like, it's still, like, a legitimate profession. And at one point, it was exclusive to men only. Only men could be, entertained by geisha. But now women can go and also enjoy the attentions of geisha, if that is your thing.
Yeah.
So.
It truly is like a art to be able to have conversations with strangers and make them feel like
loved and attended to. And like they're the only person.
I could never. I'd be the worst. I'd be like, what do you want?
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, I just literally, you smell, you gotta go. So yeah, that's geishas. Well, some about geishas.
Okay, before we sign off, I just want to say I looked it up, and the candles in the windows that happens in like a bunch of different regions, but it was brought to the United States mostly by the Irish. So
we were wrong.
We were wrong.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. I don't hate you for it.
Yeah.
And now we don't have to have a corrections corner next week. So corrections corner has been cut next week. So don't write us anything, folks. Nothing.
There's still room for us to have made mistakes. Who knows? And there's a
this was a dense topic, heavy week. So if we miss something, please write us and let us know. We always love to correct ourselves and make sure that we're providing you with the most accurate information that we are capable of providing, which is not necessarily facts.
If you're coming here for really the truth, you need to find another podcast. All right, this is not
no,
this is not the place for you. But if you do want to tell us what we did wrong, you can find us on Twitter at the Good Eve Girls,
or Instagram at the Good Evening Girls,
or TikTok at the Good Eve Girls.
Yep, we also have a second podcast called Meet Me in Forks, where we read chapter by chapter Stephanie Meyer's new book. If you're into that kind of horrible thing, come on over.
Come join us. We have fun over there.
We do.
But if not, I guess we'll just see you next time after Thanksgiving.
After Thanksgiving, yes, there's going to be a little bit of a break, but we'll see you then, folks. Bye.
Bye-bye.